Hello again, third graders. So we left off when Pippi had just stood up for little Willie to Banked, and Banked had just started to be very unkind to Pippi. He'd even pushed her. Let's see what happened. "I don't think you have a very nice way with ladies," said Pippi. And she lifted him in her strong arms, high in the air, and carried him to a birch tree, and hung him over a branch. Then she took the next boy and hung him over another branch. The next one she set on a gatepost outside a cottage, and the next one she threw right over a fence, so he landed in a flower bed. The last of the fighters she put into a tiny toy cart that stood by the road. Then Pippi, Tommy, Annika, and Willie stood and looked at the boys for a while. The boys were absolutely speechless with fright. And Pippi said, "You are cowards, 5 of you attacking one boy. That's cowardly." Then we began to push a helpless little girl around. Oh, how mean. "Come now, we'll go home," she said to Tommy and Annika, and to Willie. "If they try to hurt you again, you come and tell me." And to Banked, who sat up in the tree and didn't dare to stir, she said, "Is there anything else you have to say about my hair or my shoes? If so, you'd better say it now before I go home." But Banked had nothing more to say about Pippi's shoes or about her hair either. So Pippi took her can in one hand and her spool in the other and went away, followed by Tommy and Annika. When they were back home in Pippi's garden, Pippi said, "Dear me, how awful. Here I found 2 beautiful things, and you didn't get anything. You must hunt a little more. Tommy, why don't you look in that old hollow tree? Old trees are usually about the best places of all for thing finders." Tommy said he didn't believe he and Annika would ever find anything, but to please Pippi, he put his hand slowly into the hollow tree trunk. "Goodness!" he cried, utterly amazed, and pulled out his hand. In it, he held a little notebook with a leather cover. In a special loop, there was a little silver pencil. "Well, that's queer," said Tommy. "Now, see that?" said Pippi. "There's nothing so nice as being a thing finder. It's a wonder there aren't more people that take it up. There'll be tailors and shoemakers and chimney sweeps and such that, but thing finders, no indeed. That isn't good enough for them." And then she said to Annika, "Why don't you feel in that old tree stump? One practically always finds things in tree stumps." Annika stuck her hand down in the stump and almost immediately got hold of a red coral necklace. She and Tommy stood open-mouthed for a long time. They were so astonished. They thought that hereafter there would be thing finders every single day. Pippi had been up half the night before, playing ball, and now she suddenly felt very sleepy. "I think I'll have to go and take a nap," she said. "Can't you come with me and tuck me in?" When Pippi was sitting on the edge of the bed, taking off her shoes, she looked at them thoughtfully and said, "He was going out rowing," he said, "that old Banked." She snorted disdainfully. "I'll teach him to row, indeed I will. Another time." "Say, Pippi," said Tommy respectfully, "why do you wear such big shoes?" "So I can wiggle my toes, of course," she answered. Then she crept into bed. She always slept with her feet on the pillow and her head way down under the quilt. "That's the way they sleep in Guatemala," she announced. "And it's the only real way to sleep. See, like this, I can wiggle my toes when I'm sleeping, too." Another illustration. This one is Annika and Tommy. You can see Pippi, too, with her big can. There they go, digging in the hollow of the tree in the tree stump. Thing finders. "Can you go to sleep without a lullaby?" she went on. "I always have to sing to myself for a while, otherwise I can't sleep a wink." Tommy and Annika heard a humming sound under the quilt. It was Pippi singing herself to sleep. Quietly and cautiously they tiptoed out, so that they would not disturb her. In the doorway they turned to take a last look toward the bed. They could see nothing of Pippi except her feet resting on the pillow. There she lay, wiggling her toes emphatically. Tommy and Annika ran home. Annika held her coral necklace tightly in her hand. "That certainly was strange," she said. "Tommy, do you suppose that Pippi had put these things in place beforehand?" "You never can tell," said Tommy. You just never can tell about anything when it comes to Pippi. What do you think? You never can tell. Chapter 3. Pippi plays tag with some policemen. So next illustration. What do you see in that one? Is this Pippi? I see some stockings, although there aren't braids. Where does it look like she is? Do you recognize that? It soon became known throughout the little town that a 9-year-old girl was living all by herself in Villa Villacula, and all the ladies and gentlemen in the town thought this would never do. All children must have someone to advise them, and all children must go to school to learn the multiplication tables. So the ladies and gentlemen decided that the little girl in Villa Villacula must immediately be placed in a children's home. That's like an orphanage. Can you think of another book that we're reading where there was an orphanage as part of our setting? One lovely afternoon, Pippi had invited Tommy and Annika over for afternoon coffee and paper caca. She had spread the party out on the front steps. It was so sunny and beautiful there, and the air was filled with the fragrance of the flowers in Pippi's garden. Mr. Nilsson climbed around on the porch railing, and every now and then the horse stuck out his head so that he'd be invited to have a cookie. "Oh, isn't it glorious to be alive?" said Pippi, stretching out her legs as far as she could reach. Just at that moment, 2 police officers in full uniform came in through the gate. "Hooray!" said Pippi. "This must be my lucky day, too. Policemen are the very best things I know, next to rhubarb pudding." And with her face beaming, she went to meet them. "Is this the girl who has moved into Villa Villacula?" asked one of the policemen. "Quite the contrary," said Pippi. "This is a tiny little auntie who lives on the 3rd floor at the other end of town." She said that only because she wanted to have a little fun with the policemen, but they didn't think it was funny at all. They said she shouldn't be such a smarty, and then they went on to tell her that some nice people in the town were arranging for her to get into a children's home. "I already have a place in a children's home," said Pippi. "What?" asked one of the policemen. "Has it been arranged already then? What children's home?" "This one," said Pippi haughtily. "I am a child, and this is my home. Therefore it is a children's home, and I have enough room here, plenty of room." "Dear child," said the policeman, smiling, "you don't understand. You must get into a real children's home and have someone to look after you." "Is one allowed to bring horses to your children's home?" asked Pippi. "No, of course not," said the policeman. "That's what I thought," said Pippi sadly. "Well, what about monkeys?" "Of course not. You ought to realize that." "Well then," said Pippi, "you'll have to get kids for your children's home somewhere else. I certainly don't intend to move there." "But don't you understand that you must go to school?" "Why?" "To learn things, of course." "What sorts of things?" asked Pippi. "All sorts," said the policeman. "Lots of useful things. The multiplication tables, for instance. I have got along fine without any fructification tables for 9 years," said Pippi, "and I guess I'll get along without it from now on, too." "Yes, but just think how embarrassing it will be for you to be so ignorant. Imagine when you grow up and somebody asks you what the capital of Portugal is and you can't answer." "Oh, I can answer all right," said Pippi. "I'll answer like this. If you are so bound and determined to find out what the capital of Portugal is, then for goodness sake write directly to Portugal and ask." "Yes, but don't you think that you would be sorry not to know it yourself?" "Oh, probably," said Pippi. "No doubt I should lie awake nights and wonder what in the world is the capital of Portugal. But one can't be having fun all the time," she continued, bending over and standing on her hands for a change. "For that matter, I've been in Lisbon with my papa," she added, still standing upside down, for she could talk that way too. But then one of the policemen said that Pippi certainly didn't need to think. She could do just as she pleased. She must come to the children's home, and immediately. He went up to her and took hold of her arm, but Pippi freed herself quickly, touched him lightly, and said, "Tag!" Before he could wink an eye, she had climbed up on the porch railing, and from there onto the balcony above the porch. The policemen couldn't quite see themselves getting up the same way, and so they rushed into the house and up the stairs. But by the time they had reached the balcony, Pippi was halfway up the roof. She climbed up the shingles almost as if she were a little monkey herself. In a moment, she was up on the ridgepole, and from there jumped easily to the chimney. Down on the balcony stood the two policemen, scratching their heads, and on the lawn stood Tommy and Annika, staring at Pippi. "Isn't it fun to play tag?" cried Pippi. "And weren't you nice to come over? It certainly is my lucky day today, too." After the policemen had stood there a while wondering what to do, they went and got a ladder, leaned it against one of the gables of the house, and then climbed up, first one policeman and then the other, to get Pippi down. They looked a little scared when they climbed out on the ridgepole, and, carefully balancing themselves, went step by step toward Pippi. "Don't be scared," cried Pippi. "There's nothing to be afraid of. It's just fun." When the policemen were a few steps away from Pippi, down she jumped from the chimney and, screeching and laughing, ran along the ridgepole of the opposite gable. A few feet from the house stood a tree. "Now I'm going to dive," she cried, and jumped right down into the green crown of the tree, caught hold of a branch, swung back and forth a while, and then let herself fall to the ground. Quick as a wink, she dashed around to the other side of the house and took away the ladder. The policemen had looked a little foolish when Pippi jumped, but they looked even more so when they had balanced themselves backwards along the ridgepole and were about to climb down the ladder. At first they were very angry at Pippi, who stood on the ground looking up at them, and they told her in no uncertain terms to get the ladder and be quick about it, or she would soon get something she wasn't looking for. "Why are you so cross at me?" asked Pippi reproachfully. "We're just playing tag, aren't we?" The policeman thought a while, and at last one of them said, "Oh, come on, won't you be a good girl and put the ladder back so that we can get down?" "Of course I will," said Pippi, and put the ladder back instantly. "And when you get down, we can all drink coffee and have a happy time." But the policemen were certainly tricky, because the minute they were down on the ground again, they pounced on Pippi and cried, "Now you'll get it, you little brat." "Oh no, I'm sorry, I haven't the time to play any longer," said Pippi. "But it was fun." Then she took hold of the policemen by their belts and carried them down the garden path, out through the gate, and onto the street. There she set them down, and it was quite some time before they were ready to get up again. "Wait a minute," she cried, and ran into the kitchen and came back with 2 cookie hearts. "Would you like a taste?" she asked. "It doesn't matter that they are a little burned, does it?" Then she went back to Tommy and Annika, who stood there wide-eyed and just couldn't get over what they had seen. So here's Pippi carrying the 2 policemen, and here's Villa Villacrula. And the policeman hurried back to town and told all the ladies and gentlemen that Pippi wasn't quite fit for a children's home. They didn't tell that they had been up on the roof. And the ladies and gentlemen decided that it would be best after all to let Pippi remain in Villa Villacrula, and if she wanted to go to school, she could make those arrangements herself. But Pippi and Tommy and Annika had a very pleasant afternoon. They went back to their interrupted coffee party. Pippi stuffed herself with 14 cookies, and then she said, "They weren't what I mean by real policemen. No, sirree. Altogether too much talk about children's homes and plutification in Lisbon." Afterward, she lifted the horse down onto the ground, and they rode on him, all 3. At first, Annika was afraid and didn't want to, but when she saw what fun Tommy and Pippi were having, she let Pippi lift her up onto the horse's back. The horse trotted round and round in the garden, and Tommy sang, "Here come the Swedes with a clang and a bang." When Tommy and Annika had gone to bed that night, Tommy said, "Annika, don't you think it's good that Pippi moved here?" "Oh, yes," said Annika. "I don't even remember what we used to play before she came. Do you?" "Oh, sure. We played croquet and things like that," said Annika. "But it's lots more fun with Pippi around, I think. And with horses and things."